The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we're coming to you live from the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California. Thrilled to be here with you on this Wednesday morning, most especially thrilled because we have with us in just a few minutes Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh for Ask Dr. Doreen. A little bit later on in the hour, not in the hour, the next hour, we'll have Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Nancy Allspot Jackson is here. Everybody's in the house and we've got a great guest. Dara Berger is going to be with us during that hour to talk about her new book, very controversial. It's called How to Prevent Autism. And there are a lot of people who have a lot of feelings about that, but we're going to talk to her about what the book really is about to see if that's something that interests you and something that you want to have a conversation about. But before all of that, we want to remind you that this entire show is meant to be interactive. We want to hear from you. We want to know your thoughts, your feelings, your questions, your concerns, all of that. And we've got many different ways that you can get in touch with us here. So Samantha is going to show you some of the different ways that you can be talking with us. And while she does that, I want to remind you that our homepage is autism-live.com. When you go there, there's a lot to do, but we encourage you to click on the little triangle that's on the computer screen, and in that way you can be watching the live show or the most recently recorded live show. If you want to go back in time, you can watch the 100 most recent episodes by clicking on the memo tab that's in the upper left-hand corner. And of course, there is the live feature on the homepage. It's a series of white boxes. One of them says your question. You can put your cursor in that box and start typing. That's really all it takes. You don't have to log in. There's no username. There's no password. There's no request for a credit card because it's totally free and it's totally anonymous. All you have to do is push enter and it shows up here on my screen. There's a little bit of a time lag, but I'll be able to see your question in almost real time. But of course, you can also be watching us on Facebook Live and put your questions in there as well as on YouTube. I will tell you though that on those places, people will be able to tell who you are. If you want to be anonymous, autism-live.com. That is the place to go. So excited, and for those of you who have written in, because I wasn't feeling so good last week, I'm feeling so much better, but my voice does cut in and out occasionally. I don't know what that's about still, because I had too much fun over the weekend celebrating a boy turning 14. I think that's what it's more about. In any case, I want to do a special shout out, because I have a feeling that there are a couple of people watching that have never watched the show before. So shout out to all of you, most especially to Miss Ellie and Miss Addie. We welcome you to watching the show. But right now, it is time for Ask Dr. Doreen.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, and she's going to answer your questions in real time. For those of you who don't know or aren't familiar with Dr. Granpeesheh, she is a true expert in the field of autism. I believe the preeminent expert in the field of autism, and she's also a visionary. We were just talking about this briefly before that. If I had to go to somebody and say, you know, what should I do? What should somebody else do? It would absolutely hands down be you.
Thank you so much.
And you've been doing that for people for many years now, for more than 3 decades, and have helped multiple tens of thousands of people on the autism spectrum to be able to find their way to gain skills, to be able to do things that are meaningful in their lives. And I think that's a huge thing. But you also, you take into account everybody's perspective, their perspective, the individual that's on the spectrum, and the family. And I think that that's unique. I wish we could clone you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Too much chaos in the universe.
No, it'd be fabulous. But in any case, Dr. Grant-Pichet is here to answer your questions. She donates this hour to all of us. We do like to give a disclaimer at the beginning that there is no expert in any field, but especially in the field of autism, who could give individual specific advice in this forum. So it does mean that Dr. Grant-Pichet will look at your questions and she will give answers of a general nature that will hopefully help you to be able to go to the experts in your area and get more specific answers.
Exactly. We'll do the best we can with the information we have.
But we learn so much at your feet.
Well, thank you so much. But yeah, we just want to make sure people know that sometimes the information in these questions is just not enough for us to be able to give exact direction. So, please be aware of that.
But having said that, as we've said earlier, there's so many different ways to write into the show, but one of the ways, sometimes when you're writing in the live feature, it only gives you a certain number of characters, and you can keep writing in.
Right.
And we mostly can piece together which question goes with which question. But if you need a longer space, you do have the ability to message us on Facebook, and you also have the ability to email me if you want to write a longer letter.
Right.
The first question that we had today came to us, it's a longer one, and we may not read the whole thing, but it came to us as a message on our Facebook page, on Autism Live's Facebook page. So they wrote it in and said, "Dear Shannon and Dr. Doreen, I apologize in advance for how long this email is." And she says, "I'm the mom who wrote in a few weeks ago regarding my 2-year-old and my insurance not covering ABA." She goes on to say, "I cried when I heard my question read. I feel so alone in this," and I think we can all relate to that. She says, "Since my son's diagnosis, I've been living, breathing, and eating information about autism. I watch Autism Live every week and have begun watching older shows from months and even years back. My husband is wonderful and very helpful, but when it comes to trying to figuring out what's the best course of action, it's all on me." And that's a common tale. There's even a couple that does a talk, and they say that one person becomes the project manager and the other person tries to keep the roof over the head, and that's a lot of times how it falls in an autism family.
And that's kind of how it has to be, and it works if each person is able to take a different role. And in this case, when you read on, this mom is a nurse.
Yes.
So it makes sense because she just has more knowledge.
It does make sense. But she goes on to say, doctors are not being very helpful in the sense that I ask about biomedical aspect of autism. I'm met with judgmental looks, and I'm told flat out that those biomedical approaches don't work. He even had severe reflux and a milk protein allergy as an infant. When I asked the GI about the gut-brain connection, he gave me no insight and said kids with autism have GI issues.
Which that just kills me,
Doesn't it? It offends me to my eye teeth.
Not only that doctors would say none of this is true, but the fact that you just say, oh, all kids with autism have GI issues, which has absolutely nothing to do with autism at all.
And unfortunately, then they decide not to treat them as a child that they would treat who was having GI issues.
Exactly.
This is autism.
This is called overshadowing, and this kind of really concerns me, and it's so important that people don't ignore these other things that are going on with their kids. It's so important.
It's horrifying. Okay, but she goes on to say, when I asked about the gut-brain connection, he gave me no insight, said kids with autism. My son has, the doctor doesn't believe in detoxing. Mm-hmm. She says, my son has eczema and keratosis pilaris. I have him on a dairy-free, gluten-free diet. I asked the GI about yeast overgrowth, and he does not believe in that either. I've got words for him. And she says, I have nowhere to turn. Well, fortunately, that's not true. That's the part that's not true. She says, my insurance only covers the pediatric GIs in that office, and it's so frustrating. What helps me a little is that I'm a nurse, and since I ask certain more probative questions, they don't totally disregard me, but I would love to find a physician that sees my son as a whole when it comes to autism. I don't believe I'm going to get an appropriate second opinion in that office. They're not looking at him as a whole. Thank you for answering my question a few weeks ago. You were right. The card I had the appointment for was the card, because we to catch people up. In Florida, there are two different cards. One is attached to a university that has nothing to do with the card that we're talking about.
Right. And it's Center for Autism-Related Disabilities, actually. It's a little bit different than the...
Okay. She says, I contacted your card in Boca Raton, Florida, and they were so nice and helpful. I plan on applying for Medicaid, but I was told the card doesn't accept it in Florida yet. Also, I purchased the skills program in the interim to start doing ABA myself at home. In regard to IBT, which program do you recommend, the module for parents or the RBT modules? I apologize for all the questions, but I have one more. He is engaging in headbanging. I'm trying to figure out the function of the headbanging and stop him from doing it. He's a sensory seeker with all of his senses for the most. He does not avoid any visual, auditory, or tactile input. He bangs the back of his head while in the high chair in the car seat. He starts off soft, but then gradually gets faster and faster. He has, and I'm not sure how to say that, Chiari malformation. However, the neurologist is not concerned about it. It is a 4-millimeter herniation of the cerebellum, and the cerebral tonsils are triangular. I'm afraid that the headbanging is going to make the Chiari worse. When I tell him no, he looks right at me and smiles or laughs and continues to do it. I don't believe he bangs his head because of pain. He is very happy and a content kid. He is always smiling, laughing. Sometimes he does laugh inappropriately, which makes me wonder about yeast overgrowth. He also bangs his head when he's mad. He bangs the front of his head when he's mad and not in a chair. Luckily, he doesn't have a texture aversion and will eat anything and everything I give him, which I'm grateful for. But when his meal is done, he will scream and cry and bang his head. I distract him by being silly or singing, and he stops and he doesn't continue to cry for food. So I'm sure he's not still hungry. He also has been mouthing and biting his toys and fingers, and when he drinks water, he holds it in his mouth for a long time before swallowing it. When I tell him to swallow the water, he laughs. All this makes me believe it may be an oral sensory issue, but I'm not sure how to fix it. And thank you so much for your help. You have no idea how much I appreciate it. And we adore you. Right? This is an honest mom.
Yes, absolutely. And I was taking notes because there's so much to tell you.
You have to. We should have had the camera on you because you were furiously scribbling.
I just hope
there's
I don't
a lot
forget
there.
anything. Yeah, there's a lot going on, and I'll try not to talk about, just answer this one question the whole show, but I'll do my best here.
Okay.
So a couple of things. First of all, you have found your tribe. We're here. Let me tell you this, what you're experiencing is not unique. In fact, it's probably, I want to say maybe 80% of parents who have had a child with autism have gone through this sort of thing, where their pediatricians or even further GI doctors will kind of mock where we are right now and what we know about autism. I've been in the field of just ABA for almost 40 years, and I, to this day, still hear people saying it is impossible to recover from autism. So, 40 years of work later, and it's still, the first publication we had on the subject of recovery was 1987. So we're talking, it takes a really long time and many, many years for things to settle down. On the issue of biology of autism, I think either on our show or somewhere online, there's got to be some presentations that I've done in the past. I've talked a lot about this concept because for me, and this might be interesting for other people listening as well, but the way that I see autism is definitely, and you refer to whole child, and maybe you've seen some of my presentations that were called Autism, the Whole Child. And really what we're talking about is, from my perspective, there's no question, we know already that in some cases at least, there's a genetic predisposition, but that genetic predisposition, what it really affects in the children, the biology underlying what we see with our kids, is very often related to what's going on in their immune system, which means also related to the GI tract, of course. And there is, when children have inflammation in their GI tract, which sounds like your child does, due to perhaps these allergens or perhaps something else, we don't know yet, there's no question that his immune system is not functioning the way it should be. A lot of our kids react to toxins very differently. A lot of our children have severe redox issues, and I would really recommend that you do continue to pursue the medical issues, because we look at this just the example you gave, where your child has gastrointestinal problems and the doctors are saying, oh, this is just about the autism. If it was any other child, as Shannon said, and they had bloating, if they had diarrhea, constipation, just gastrointestinal pain, whatever it was, everyone would take that seriously. We would definitely be treating that child. With our kids, somehow the doctors are like, oh, that's just part of autism. It is such an ignorant statement to say that's part of autism. It has absolutely nothing to do with the diagnosis of autism. And we're just ignoring the fact that there's a high correlation with children who have autism, who also have, and it's so high that it might even be causative, and people are not willing to look at it. So it's amazing. You're doing the right thing in regards to the diet. I do recommend, so here's 2 doctors that you can contact. I believe you're in Florida.
Yes.
And I don't know which side of Florida you're on, but in the Miami southeastern section of Florida, so in the Miami area, a very good friend of mine, Dr. Andrew Levinson. He is a orthomolecular psychiatrist. He has a center called Vitality Health and Wellness, and you can look him up online and see how he treats patients. Both of these guys were Dan physicians. Both of these guys are very, very well trained in what is now called MAPS, which MAPS are the doctors that kind of used to be called Dan doctors, and they are the ones that are kind of, I would say they're on the cutting edge. They're looked at sometimes differently because the things that they believe in, the whole concept of redox and inflammation and allergies and all that sort of stuff, and leaky gut and all that, there is a lot of research and publication behind it, but a lot of mainstream physicians still choose to think that this is sort of crazy and out there. All of these physicians are specialists only in autism. They work, although Andrew is a psychiatrist, he has very few patients outside of autism. He does see regular patients, but he mainly focuses on autism. So that is one avenue. And another doctor who actually Andrew and David used to be partners is David Berger. David is in Tampa, and so the other side, and he's a pediatrician, and you would have to really decide. They have different styles, so go on their websites and figure out which one you prefer.
And we've had them both on the show.
Okay.
You can look at interviews for both of them on the show and see they're both 2 of the most amazing people.
Absolutely.
I would love to be in the room with either one of them.
Absolutely. They're
amazing
both extremely
people.
knowledgeable, and I think you will not go wrong. And given that you're a nurse, so you have 2 choices here. One is that you try to get your insurance to cover one or the other. The other option is just to go and pay for it privately, because given that you're a nurse, you can learn very quickly, and I think that you could probably benefit from a few meetings. Also, go back online, go look on the Autism Research Institute website. I think they actually, their URL is autism.com.
Yes.
And Steve Edelson, who is a wonderful guy who took over for an even more wonderful guy, Dr. Bernie Rimland. The Autism Research Institute is packed with research and information, and a lot of, the whole DAN movement, the biomedical movement came from Dr. Bernie Rimland's work, and from Dr. Rimland bringing together all the physicians in the world and having them meet and discuss these issues. So historically and current, all of the information that we know on the biomedical is accessible through the Autism Research Institute. I don't know if they still have their newsletter, but if you just go online, they have tons of information that you can access, tons of prior conferences that you can view, and I highly recommend that you view these when you have time, and they will be very, very useful to you in figuring out what you need to do for your child medically. You're doing the diet, that's great. Sometimes you need to do other types of diets. Some of the children react also to soy and corn. Some of the children do better on a specific carb diet, which is a different type of diet. So, you may want to research that a little bit better. The person that I usually go to for dietary information is Julie Matthews. She's in San Francisco. She's also very knowledgeable. She's also been on this show.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who are fantastic with dietary information. Of course, I'm sure Andrew and David can both assist you with all of that as well. That's where you start. I think that's what you kind of work on. And then you're training yourself, and you're doing a fabulous job in terms of learning more about ABA. So let me just go in there for a minute and give you some feedback there. I would probably, to begin with, I would start with the IBT modules for parents. And then if you are in, the RBT the module for registered behavior technicians or board certified autism technicians are a little bit technical. I don't know if you need that level of technicality, because we're talking about, if you were to be the sole person doing therapy yourself, I'd say go to the RBT module right away. But I think you need to go to the parents module and then see how you feel about it. I don't think they're not basic. The parents modules are fantastic, and they get more and more and more advanced. So I would just start there, and I would go with those. They're very, very good modules. I enjoy those quite a bit. And then I think what you need to do is, if you hire a team of people, if you want to get a good ABA program going for your child, and let's say your insurance isn't covering it, and we're trying to get into Medicaid. It's an application process, but we're working on that. And I'm not sure if we actually got it approved or not. We may have. I'll have to find out. But until that happens, you can always hire a team of people and pay them minimum wage and have them trained through the RBT modules. And that way they will really learn the science of ABA and what to do. And that way you'll have a team of people, and your child is 2, and you really should be starting with somewhere. Probably you want to start with like maybe 3 hours a day, 2 hours a day. I mean, you're going to have to break it up. Even if you do 3 hours a day, you're going to only be able to do half-hour segments, which are broken up. So you won't be able to get much more than that done with a 2-year-old, because 2-year-olds get tired very quickly. I generally ramp up sessions to about 40 hours by the time the child hits 3. So at 2, you could do a lot less. And when I say you're doing like 3 hours a day of ABA work, you have a team of, say, 3 people who work with you, and they rotate, right? So each of them will come for an hour a day, and what they will do is, or, one of them will take Mondays and Wednesdays, another one, however you mix up that schedule. And then they will do a 30-minute segment of time, and the 30 minutes is now will be composed of various things from skills. And there'll be things like nonverbal imitation of sounds, just basic receptive language, like giving or pointing to objects, touching objects, very, very basic things that will just start to teach your child some compliance. And just kind of, it's very important in the beginning. We always do what's called discrete trial, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to establish a connection with the child, where the child understands that I will give you an instruction, you will do the correct behavior, and then I will give you a reinforcer. That 3-segment thing is called a discrete trial. It's an antecedent behavior consequence type thing, and that's very, very important. Once that's established, the whole flow of ABA can go faster, because the child then knows that a response is expected. You'll learn a lot of this stuff on IBT. I want to give you some direct feedback on some of these things. The head banging that he's doing in his car seat, for instance, and so on, is most likely not an avoidance type thing. It sounds like a sensory type of thing. And so I would try to get him a helmet, because I would want to prevent the sensory feeling that he gets from banging. It could also be not just the sensory from banging, but the visual that occurs from doing this. A lot of times we don't realize that there's a visual component to some of the self-stimulatory stuff. That, many of my kids will spit, and then you're thinking, oh, I wonder, if that's an oral motor type thing, and it isn't. And we found for many of the kids, they're looking at the spit as
and the colors.
It's the visual, exactly. And it's fascinating that we don't think about that. So it could also be a visual self-stimulatory type thing. And you can find out by perhaps having some sort of like a like an iPad or something on the back of the seat in front of him, and see if he does it when he's occupied, when he's visually occupied. So what your goal with that sort of head banging is to prevent it. You can't prevent it by just saying stop. That's not going to happen. He doesn't really, at this point, I don't know your child well enough, but I think most of the language will be more like blah, blah, blah. He's not really understanding the concepts of stop and do this and so on. So he's just enjoying the interaction, which is why he giggles or laughs or has fun with you. So the way to stop these behaviors is to prevent them, is to block them. Now, you'll either be preventing it by the helmet because he just won't get the sensation, or you'll be preventing it by keeping his visual busy with something else. Let us know how that goes. The fact that he also bangs his head when he's mad, that is a different function. So it's very, very possible. Always remember that you can have one topography of a behavior, one type of behavior like head banging, and it can have multiple functions. So it can happen when he wants the sensation, which he'll head bang backwards perhaps, or it can happen when he's angry and he'll head bang and hit something because what he's trying to do, because probably what happens is when he's done that in the past, people have backed off and left him alone. So to him, it's a way of saying, leave me alone, I don't want to deal with a demand. So that head banging is demand avoidance. He's trying to avoid whatever it is you told him to do. Now, so in that case, the response is you actually motor him through whatever it is. I think you said when he's mad and is not, I don't know what makes him mad, but whatever, if you placed a demand and that made him mad and then he head banged, that would indicate he's just trying to avoid the demand, in which case you would want to make sure he doesn't avoid it. So you would kind of motor him through it, give easier instructions so that he can do them. But I would not allow him to get away with things just by head banging. That's the important message here, because when our kids head bang and then we back off, what happens is they learn that head banging sufficiently freaked you out to leave me alone. So from here on, when I want you to not give me a demand or place a demand on me, I'm going to head bang. So what you're doing in effect is actually teaching him to increase head banging, which is definitely not something you want. So that's not good. With the issue of the meals, he is eating, and then I think what you're saying is that he cries for more food. What I think you should be doing is you should start to teach him to point to pictures of food items so that you're placing a contingency on it so that he has to request more food. So for instance, if you have a bunch of different, let's say you're giving him a meal which consists of, I don't know, chicken and peas and potatoes, and you are able to either, and I suggest you teach him actually, you have pictures that represent peas and pictures that represent potatoes and pictures that represent chicken, and it looks very similar. And you have the pictures, you could use a Polaroid, you could just teach these to him separately as a part of a program. And when he wants more of something, he has to point to it. Now, ultimately, in the long run, he'll end up having a whole array of pictures because there's certain foods, and 2-year-olds don't have a whole bunch of foods they like. Having GI issues, might even be picky. But let's say you have 10 food items, you can teach him those food items and he can point to it. So this is the very beginning of communication where he will tell you what he wants more. And because that requires him to do something, it'll be less likely that he will keep asking for more food because there's a demand involved now. And if he's really hungry, then he will go ahead and do that. You don't try to distract. So he screams and cries, and then you distract him by being silly and singing. Being silly and singing is a fun thing, so it could be classified as a reinforcer, and it's following the screaming and crying. So human nature is when a reinforcer follows a certain behavior, that behavior increases. So by being silly and singing with him to distract him, I know that's your goal, but what's actually happening is he will learn that in the future, if he wants you to sing and be silly, he'll cry and do all those behaviors because you've now paired the reinforcer with that particular behavior. So whenever he does something you don't like, walk away from it. Don't reinforce it by interacting, talking to him, giving him being silly and singing and that sort of stuff. Turn your back on it, and don't attend to it. That's called extinction, and you will learn that in the IBT modules. Finally,
it's completely contrary to what we've all been raised.
Very contrary. Yes.
I had to put a thing on my mirror that said reward good behavior and act like the bad behavior didn't happen.
Exactly.
Because I couldn't remember that. Because I had been trained as a person that be on your kid. They do something, don't do that, stop, don't do that. It's the complete opposite.
Total opposite.
But I put it on the mirrors in all the bathrooms so
Right.
that I would remember as often as possible, act like the bad behavior didn't happen. And other people around you will lose their minds. They'll be like, aren't you going to say something about? No, I'm not going to say something about that.
And it's so important, and it's so interesting because you know how people say that ABA has a reputation of being like abusive or too difficult. And we are the people that ignore bad behavior,
Right.
Which is really interesting for me. But so, and then finally, the last thing is this whole swallowing of
Yes.
water and holding
And by the
it in
way,
his
we
mouth.
had another a viewer who wrote in and said, oh my goodness, that's my kid. He bangs his head and he holds water in his mouth.
Okay.
So we have more than one listener.
That's interesting. So just reduce the amount of water per sip. So just give him a tiny amount of water in the cup. If he swallows it immediately, give him more.
Okay.
If he swishes it around, you're not giving him any more. Just that's the way to go. That's the bottom line. And eventually, this is not something you're prepared to deal with right now. Eventually, you will deal with this because we will get him acclimated to a timer, and you will then get him to swallow within certain timer settings. I don't want to mess with it right now because I'm not sure. I don't know enough about him. I don't know what his diet is like. Sometimes when you start dealing with food and drink, it starts to affect the variety of things the child drinks or eats. But right now, just give him very small, like tiny amounts of water so that he, at best, he can hold one sip in his mouth.
Okay. But not make it a big deal. Not make it your whole life,
No.
minimal, no discussion about it. You just put less water
Exactly.
in. Okay, great. That was a workout.
Yeah.
That was a half of the show.
When I saw the question,
know, there's
and I
so much
really
there.
care about parents like this. You are the reason I'm in this field. Let me just tell you, because I'm so dedicated to people who are willing to do so much.
Yeah.
And I just want to help you as much as I possibly can. So feel free to write into us more, and we'll do the best we can.
Absolutely. We're going to take a short break, and then when we come back, we've got a question from a grandparent about a 3.5-year-old. We've got a question about a newly diagnosed 5-year-old, and then we're going to talk a little bit about summer and how to schedule a day for the summer for kids who think they want to be on the TV all the time. So stick with us. More Ask Dr. Doreen after these messages.
Hi, I'm Yvonne Johansson, and this is My Little House.
My Little House is an interactive, multi-sensory educational felt toy that I invented to help develop children's language skills.
I love My Little House.
I've been working as a speech therapist for over 20 years. I have spent my entire career working with young children. I work with children with language delays, and I have many children with significant cognitive disabilities and children on the autism spectrum. It has been a constant challenge finding toys that are fun, educational, and actually engage my students. In every preschool since I've been a young therapist, we carry on these felt boards. Kids love them because they're soft and they're fluffy, and there's usually these little pieces that attach to these boards because felt sticks onto felt. You bring them into the activity because they're putting a piece on the board. So it's almost kind of like magic. So then I just thought, wouldn't it be great if I could just take this one-dimensional board and make it into an actual three-dimensional toy? How cool would that be?
That's the idea behind My Little House. You can spread it out flat like a 4-panel felt board, or here's the cool part. In the blink of an eye, My Little House easily converts into a 3-dimensional reversible house.
This is the outside. This is the inside.
My Little House comes with 36 felt cutout pieces that match outlines in 8 colorful rooms. And they're felt, so they stick. Each piece inside My Little House has been placed with purpose.
For instance, in the kitchen, whole, half, under, on top, inside, big, bigger, and biggest, empty and full, circle, triangle, inside, outside.
Really cool thing, I have a nonprofit, Lecotech. They are the folks that put out the Differently Abled Guide for Toys R Us. They've been doing it for 25 years. They gave me their seal of approval as a toy that they feel is a toy with purpose, and that will make a difference. But My Little House isn't just for kids on the spectrum or with significant disorders. It's also for typically developing 2 to 5-year-olds. It's a fun toy.
Oh, this is so soft. That piece goes.
Recently, I took My Little House to the American Speech and Hearing Association convention in Philadelphia, and the response from my peers was overwhelming. Hundreds of therapists, teachers, and heads of school districts wanted to order them.
It was real validation for me that this truly is a toy that needs to get out there.
Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod. I'm a proud autism mom, I'm a former educator, and I am the host of Autism Live. And as all 3 of those things, I want to recommend to you My Little House. This is one of the smartest toys I have ever seen for teaching language to kids who have emerging language. Whether they're on the autism spectrum or completely neurotypical, it's a great, fun, reinforcing toy, but it's especially great for our kids that are on the autism spectrum because it makes learning fun and it makes it tactile. They have these felt shapes and they get to match them up. And I'm telling you, even the adults love to play with this. We loved this toy so much that we wanted to be able to bring it to you at a great discount. So right now, if you will go to www.smartfelttoys, and when you get to the coupon code, put in a-live.com, you'll get $5 off. Isn't that great? So I want to encourage you, go and get My Little House for all the kiddos in your life. Welcome back to Autism Live. We are here with Dr. Doreen Grant-Pichet, and she's answering your questions in real time. I want to get to another question that we had come in on our Facebook as a message from a grandparent. I love it when grandparents get involved. My grandson is 3.5 years old. We've been fighting to get him therapy, but so far he gets 2 hours of speech weekly. My husband and I are taking him to a class called Kith and Kin, which is run by a teacher at the local library where the little guy can practice his social skills. The minimal amount of speech therapy has made a tremendous difference. He's now beginning to engage us on his own, and he's trying to interact with other children. How can I get the appropriate therapy for him? I feel with socialization and speech, he can catch up very quickly.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to link this to the next question that we had because it's about beginning and starting as well, in totally different areas. But another person wrote in and said on our live feature this morning and said, hello, we just found out that my 5-year-old is on the spectrum and we're just starting to learn about autism. He also has an auditory processing disorder and gets overstimulated by noise and sounds. His challenges are trouble tolerating no transitioning, spitting on other kids, and when he wants some space, difficulty tolerating young brother, he's tantruming. He will go to his room to calm down, but it slams his door. If we block it, his tantrum lasts longer. And this is the part where I feel like they're connected is where do I begin? He will go to kindergarten in the fall, and thank you very much. So
Yeah.
very different, but about beginning.
Yes, yes. You know, there's, I guess, 3 ways you can go about getting therapy right now. First of all...
But can we start by saying, because they're so new, that they have to get ABA?
Yes.
That has to happen.
Okay, so let's go back. Yes, okay, absolutely. The first family is trying to get speech therapy, and I'm not sure if they're clear that speech therapy is quite different from ABA. So the intervention that has been the only therapy, the only treatment that has been approved for autism is ABA, which stands for Applied Behavior Analysis. What that is very basic treatment, therapy. It looks like educational instruction, but it isn't. It falls under the realm of psychology. And what it is basically you learn, the therapists who work with the children use various techniques to modify the child's behaviors. And when I talk about modifying behaviors, the types of behaviors that we're modifying are two types. There's the challenging behaviors, which the second family has listed, like
spitting and tantruming.
Spitting, tantruming, etc. And those we want to reduce and get rid of ultimately. And then there's the delayed behaviors, so areas that are delayed, like no speech, no social skills, no play, no adaptive skills, whatever, and those we want to increase. And so we use these techniques in ABA to teach the child how to not engage in those challenging behaviors, and also at the same time we're trying to increase all of their skills, because the more skilled an individual becomes, the less likely they're going to use challenging behaviors to communicate. A lot of these behaviors, the majority of these challenging behaviors, are used because the child can't communicate otherwise. With our typical kids, 2 and 3-year-olds tantrum instead of using their words. What we tell them is use your words, and then they use their words, and if we can give them what they want, or if their words are useful to them, the tantrum stops. So it's really important that both of you try to get your grandchild 3.5 and your child 5-year-old involved with ABA as soon as possible.
And can I just throw in a disclaimer here too, that you might be listening and going, oh, but these kids are obviously in different skill level places.
Yes.
And a lot of times people will be told, oh, well, this child isn't high functioning enough to get ABA, or this one is too high functioning to benefit from ABA. And I wondered if you could, I know that to be total hooey.
Right.
That both of these kids, regardless of where they are skill level, what they really need is ABA, and maybe you could, briefly address
Talk about that. Absolutely. So ABA is a series of techniques. It is a subsection of psychology, and basically these techniques work with everyone. They work with you and I. An example is I have been doing this show with you for how many years now? I don't know, 4? 5? 5 years. And so for me, the behavior of doing this show is, I give up whatever else I have to do and I come down and I sit here and I answer questions for an hour. So there's a little bit of demand involved, or it's a task. However, for me, doing this show is not only infused with massive reinforcers for me, because I read these amazing emails that are all thankful for the help that we've given them. So it's incredibly reinforcing for me that my doing the show is like infused with all this reward for me, but also I really enjoy being with you. So it's for me a double reinforcer. So it's actually funny, because if I looked back at the last 5 years, this would be the only thing that has been a stable place in my calendar for the past 5 years. The only thing. Everything else changes, because nothing else actually has this level of reward for me, which is really interesting. So what that means is I do this show, I'm rewarded, so I'm more likely to keep doing this show. So any behavior, the whole concept of ABA is any behavior that is followed by a reinforcer, it increases. Any behavior that is not followed by an adequate reinforcer decreases. That's all ABA is. That principle applies to individuals with autism, when we want to increase people's behavior in the workplace, marriage counseling. I mean, you name it, that principle applies to anything. So it really has nothing at all to do with the level of functioning of the child whatsoever. It's a series of protocols and practices that apply to everyone. The content of the instruction, which is really the curriculum, has to be individualized to the child. So if there's a child who has no speech, then we will work on communication probably first. Whether it's verbal or nonverbal, it's definitely going to be communication. Also, if it's a child who has a ton of challenging behaviors, we're going to be working on communication, because communication will replace challenging behavior. If it's a higher functioning child who is talking just fine, but their social behavior is odd, that's what we're going to be working on. So if it's a, the array of lessons is massive. If it's an adult, we're most likely going to be working on, things like vocational skills or daily living skills or whatever it is. So it really has to do with what are the skills that are the most important to the child's functioning, and what are the skills that the family wants, so where should our focus be? Now, for younger children, it has been shown that if you are, let's say, 2 or 3 or 4 years old, beginning a program, and in some cases even 5, you actually have the possibility of learning everything that you're delayed on. So which would mean you have there is a possibility that you might fully recover, which means you no longer meet the criteria for a diagnosis of autism. Obviously, a diagnosis of autism requires certain deficits and certain aberrations in skills to be present. If you're young enough and you do intensive ABA, so we're talking 40 hours a week of ABA with another individual, so a therapist teaching you for 40 hours a week, then over the course of 2 to 3 years, you have a decent chance of actually catching up with other kids. At least, the research shows that at least half of the kids have that chance if they get really quality ABA. As you get older, it becomes harder and harder. Now, why is that? That's because there's more and more to teach. I always say, if I take a 2-year-old and I have 3 years, so by the time they're 5, I have a lot of time to try to teach them all the skills of a 5-year-old. But if I'm working with, let's say, a 6-year-old to start, by the time they're 9, just think about the things that I would have to teach them. It becomes impossible. There's just not enough hours in the day to be able to teach everything. So it becomes very hard for the child to catch up.
Fully. Not catch up at all, but to
Absolutely.
fully catch up.
And having said that, there's a subset of children who just take a much longer time. I've had children in therapy for 10 years, and then they ultimately catch up completely, So there are children who will go at a slower pace, but they'll keep going and they will keep learning faster than they age. That's the key, is learning faster than your chronological age. It's like tutoring, right? Yeah. I mean, if you want to tutor someone in math, they have to learn everything that all the other kids know, but they're so far behind that they're double learning, really.
Right.
So a lot of our kids, if you can kind of get them to a point where they're getting intensive services, it's like intensive tutoring, they will learn. And there is not a single child who doesn't learn. So let's just put it that way. The children learn, it's just a matter of how much they learn. And that really is, you just need to get in it and you'll see how fast your child changes.
So for this 3.5-year-old, let's start with a 3.5-year-old that speech is making a difference for 2 hours. But if they had ABA for 40 hours a week, a lot could change. And
massive changes would occur. And I would recommend for both of these children, because even though the other child is 5, I would recommend that you try to start with about 40 hours for both children, because you just don't know initially. And the second child has a lot of challenging behaviors. So when you have a lot of challenging behaviors, it becomes very important to control the child's environment. If you do, let's say, 3 hours, or 10 hours, whatever, the rest of those 30, the child gets a little confused because now they have rules during those 10 hours and the old rules during the rest of the time, and it becomes very difficult to get rid of these challenging behaviors. Whereas if all of their waking hours are controlled by the rules of ABA, they'll get through these behaviors a lot faster. So, you know, I want to talk about how to get a program because I don't know where you each are. Right. There's 3 different ways that you could go about this. Obviously, the preference is if you have funding. If you have funding, which means right now ABA is covered by insurance in most locations and most types of insurance. So the first thing I would do is look at my health insurance, my medical insurance, inquire about ABA and see what coverage you have. Now, if you don't know how to do that, you can contact us. Our admissions department actually will do a benefits check for you. So we will check on coverage. If you have coverage, then your life is a lot easier, and you will, depending on where you are, we can guide you on how to set up a program. If your card right now, our company has, I think, around 140 sites. So wherever you are, we might be close to you, and we might be able to just take over and start. If you engage with us, we do all of it. So we will do everything from diagnosis to end, you know, everything. We do annual testing. We'll staff your child. We'll give you a team of people. If you're doing 40 hours, you'll need 4 or 5 people working with your child at any given time to produce a full schedule. Now, if you don't have insurance, your other options are that you can hire people in your area, and you will then hire them and train them. The way to do that, you have again 2 ways to do that. You could employ a company like ours to train them for you and help you with getting your program started and overseeing that. That's kind of called the workshop model, or what we talk about now is remote services is what we refer to it. Or the other option is to use the technology that we've produced. So many years ago, I realized there's a lot of parents out there who don't have funding. This was before insurance. And I wanted to make sure that families have access to all the information they need. So we produced 2 different companies. One is Institute for Behavioral Training, which we talked about earlier. Look that up. It is ibehavioraltraining.com. ibehavioraltraining.com. Is an online source for training in all the behavioral techniques, all the techniques of ABA. I highly recommend you as a grandparent or parent just acclimate yourself to that. This is very, very inexpensive. You can learn about autism and about ABA, and you can actually get fully trained as a parent. And each of these modules are, you know, like $10. And you can share it with other people who you want trained. You can have a whole lot, 5 of you get together and watch it together and learn together. And I really recommend them. They're very well made, and they will teach you everything you need to know about ABA, honestly, because we have professional levels too. There's levels for parents, for therapists, teachers, and professionals. So there's many. You could advance quite significantly. So that is one thing. The other thing you'll need, aside from learning the techniques, is you'll need a curriculum. And for that, I recommend you go to our skills website, and that is skillsforautism.com. And you will, it starts with an assessment of your child. And this is where the difference between the children becomes apparent, because what you do is you start by answering questions about the child. And it'll take a little while to answer all the questions, and the questions are all just, can your child do this or not? Yes or no, yes or no. And you answer all these questions, and anything that your child cannot do, it'll generate a profile of all the lessons that you have to teach. So your child can't talk, okay, then, and he's 3.5, then we have to teach him all aspects of language that a typical 3.5-year-old would do, all aspects. So you answer the assessment, and then it generates this program for you and tells you kind of how to teach each of those types of lessons. There's teaching plans, and if you are in school, it gives you IEP goals. I mean, it really gives you a comprehensive amount of information. With those 2 things in hand, you have a behavioral training and you have the content. You should be able to put a program together even yourself if you really infuse yourself in the IBT modules. Skills will guide you, and you'll be able to put a program together. You can also get just supervision from us. We do a lot of telehealth supervision where we can help oversee your case, tell you what to do, and so on and so forth. And those are your real options. I mean, the information is out there. It's a little bit harder if you have to do it yourself. Obviously, it takes a lot of time. But I highly recommend that you get involved, because all of these issues, I mean, the 3.5-year-old who is learning really rapidly with just 2 hours, that's a really good sign, and really indicates that your child has very good potential. Imagine what your child could do with 40 hours, and please do your best to get not speech therapy, but ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis. And the 5-year-old who hasn't even been diagnosed until now, what that tells me is that that child has a lot of skills already, and that the only reason they're getting a diagnosis right now is possibly because all these challenging behaviors exist. Now, challenging behaviors are not part of the autism diagnosis. They're a side effect of the autism diagnosis, because the child has a hard time communicating, and they've learned, for instance, that hey, I want some space, I'm going to throw a tantrum, and people will back off. And you might be right that he is overstimulated. A lot of our kids are overstimulated by noises and sounds. And it's funny that you said he has trouble tolerating no. A lot of kids have trouble tolerating no.
I have trouble tolerating
Everybody
no.
does. And unfortunately, we have to, sooner than later, teach our kids sometimes that they have to tolerate no. And there are techniques that you can do, that you use to get our kids to be more compliant. So please don't give up. I know it's massive. What you feel like, what you're dealing with feels like it's a lot, but it's quite doable.
And it's easy to get overwhelmed. So first of all, I just want to send you an air hug and say that this is doable. Like, I'm listening to it going, oh my gosh, that's so overwhelming.
It's so scary,
I don't think I could do it. But I know that I did. But how you do it is you do it one step at a time.
Definitely.
And even if you just have to today say, I'm going to do these 2 things. So today, you could go to the Institute, ibehavioraltraining.com, and just buy one module.
Yes.
I would recommend the one on compliance.
I agree.
Because all good things come with compliance, and for both of these kids, compliance would be a great thing.
I agree. And especially the second child, I just want you to really infuse yourself in IBT and learn about how to manage challenging behavior, because I don't want you to wait for kindergarten to deal with it in the fall. No one else is going to deal with this. They don't, unless you're trained in ABA, a lot of times these behaviors will go on forever. And like I'm telling you, this is a good opportunity to get involved and change these things.
Yeah.
You can make a huge dent in it just over the summer.
And waiting is the last thing you want to do.
Absolutely.
So you got to take some action today. So I would go to ibehavioraltraining.com, do the compliance training, and start watching it. That would count as 2 things: going to the website, getting it. Now, if you want to do one more thing, you could go to Skills and sign up for your free 14-day trial and just start answering questions in one of the curricular areas. Don't think you're going to get the whole thing done in one day.
Right.
That's not going to happen. But I'll tell you, it's the best investment in your child to take that assessment, because you will get a snapshot of where your child is. I always say, you go to the mall and it says you are here, and then you can look at the map and go, where do I want to get from here? And as a parent, I wanted that so badly with autism. I didn't get that until we took the skills assessment.
And honestly, there's no other developmental assessment that's this comprehensive. It's pretty incredible. Like, it really shows you. And don't get depressed, because it's not about, oh my gosh, all the stuff he doesn't know. It's about, now that I know what he doesn't know, I can teach him.
It's a place to start. So there's those 2 things.
And that'll explain. Actually, when children have so many weaknesses, then you understand why they're so frustrated.
Yes.
Which is why they're having these challenging behaviors.
And you will see, I mean, even at school, sometimes they talk about your child's expressive language and the receptive language. The first time I saw it on a graph and went, oh, he hears more of what I'm saying than what he says, I then knew how to play to his strengths.
Absolutely right.
So those are things. Unfortunately, we're out of time and we didn't get to the one. I promise that next week we will start with a question about what to do with a kid's time during the summer, because they want to watch TV all the time.
Yes.
But I will tell you that we did a series last year and we were refreshing it this year about Summer Slide. And we started redoing it again last Thursday about 5 things that you can do with all kids kids, no matter what level they're at, you can approach it one way. So take a look at our summer slide series about what to do to structure their time. But we'll have you answer that as well next week. Thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being on the planet.
Thank you so much.
No, sincerely. And thank all of you for writing in with these great, great questions. We're going to take a break now, and then it is time for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. And so Nancy Allspaw Jackson will be joining me. And our very special guest today is, and I want to get her name wrong, Dara Berger is going to be here with us to talk about her very controversial, a lot of people are not happy about this book, but the title of the book is How to Prevent Autism. Bring your feelings, all of them, and we're going to have a very frank conversation with her about what that actually means and what it doesn't mean and what it may mean to you and how it may feel for you. All that's coming up, plus some in the news after these messages. Stick with us.
Hi, Jack Riley. Are you in the pool? Say hi, Suzanne.
Hi, Suzanne.
He said that twice. We're just getting the camera.
Hi, Suzanne.
How's everything? Everything is good. We just actually increased our hours. So that's a little overwhelming. It includes pretty much therapy from 8:30 till about
6 p.m.
6 o'clock minus his nap time. So that's challenging, but he's doing great. 6 months ago he had 0 words. Now I don't think I can count that high. He's got so many words.
And the 25 hours, so is that strictly ABA or is that ABA plus?
That's ABA plus 2 hours of speech therapy per week plus 2 hours of OT per week.
So it's almost 30 hours, 29 hours.
He works almost more than we do.
So let's say that's like as long as my work week.
Yeah, he's got a full-time job for
a 2-year-old.
A little 2-year-old with a full-time job.
Mouth. Oh, a mouth. Where does the mouth go? Oh, nice job. So he has hands, eyes, nose, and a mouth. What else does he need? Does he need ears? Oh, there's one ear. What else does he need? Shoes. Where is his shoes? You're gonna put feet? Okay. What else does he need? Oh, a hat. Which hat is he gonna put on? That one? Say hi, Suzanne. Hi, Susan. Hi, Jack Riley. Stop.
We were diagnosed November of last year, so it's been 7 months since we've known that he has autism. He started speech therapy a month later, occupational therapy probably within a few weeks of that, and then ABA we've done for 3 months. April, May, and June.
Right.
And really, I think ABA, I don't want to compare it to the others, but I mean, we've seen a huge impact on him. And
But it's 20 some odd hours,
right.
compared to 2 and 4 or whatever. But yeah, he's changed dramatically since ABA started.
And it was hard in the beginning. We just even the biggest example I always come up with is they made him say his colors before he could use a marker to color, which was his thing at the time.
Do you want green or orange? Which one's orange? Green or orange? Orange, yeah. Good job.
So what's like the differences between before you started therapy and to what the kind of kid he is now?
I actually have not full days, but very large portions of partial days where I forget about autism and just think I have a 2-year-old. Specifically, he plays with us. He engages us. He's funny. He sort of makes jokes. I don't know how to explain that, but he does.
Oh, you got it.
The communication skills have increased dramatically, where we were impressed with how he could label everything under the sun
And mimic, and now he's actually asking for things. He's making requests. He wants help, and sometimes he'll say specifically, help open. That would have been unheard of a few months ago.
Open. What do you want?
I don't remember this fascination with learning quite so much as the last few months.
Right.
And everything that he knows, he's always looking at us like, did you catch that I knew that? Did you see that I knew that was coming?
Are you hip to this?
Well, now it's gone. He's got it. Look at you being Mr. Trying to figure things out there. I know. That's cute. And then now it's there. Now it's there. You see it? That's hilarious. Ooh. Oh, really?
How do you differentiate or like try to figure out like what is the autism, what is his personality, what is
we don't understand at all, really, and I think really we won't understand fully unless we have a neurotypical child second. And I think as we go through stages, it'll, bells will be ringing left and right. We'll be like, oh, that's what it was.
Yeah, actually, I still have trouble explaining it to friends or family when they ask, well, how do you know? I still have trouble explaining it. I know that we're right and that he's not misdiagnosed, but I still have trouble explaining it.
We look at each other all the time and say, is that 2 or is that autism? And I don't know that we ever answer it.
Probably our most common question to each other. Is that autism or is that 2-year-old? I don't know.
And I got both is probably what we usually say.
Yeah.
It's a little of both.
Yeah.
Bobby.
What? Baby.
Bobby.
Baby.
Bobby.
Mommy or baby? I don't know.
Bobby.
Mommy. Baby.
Baba.
Mommy. Baby. Baby.
Baba. Baby.
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 Is he a baby too?
I'm not a baby.
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 how does that affect everything now that you're pregnant waiting for sister? Were you nervous when you first found out you guys were pregnant?
Well, yeah, we thought about it. I thought I would be more nervous about it all, but as I told a woman within probably less than a week of getting Jack's diagnosis, because we were already thinking about having another baby at that time, and asked her very honestly, are we crazy? Is this just a bad time to bring in another? Is this not fair to our son? Do we need to focus on him? And she led me through a few questions, and the ultimate thing I said was, I'll take 5 more just like him. And I would, in a heartbeat. He's great. He's
maybe not 5.
I'll take 5 more just like him.
Okay.
You're happy with just 2.
I'm happy with 2.
No, he's a happy kid. Hasn't made him any less of a treat to watch him grow up and to watch him learn. He still is doing all those things. He might be doing them on a different timetable, but we haven't missed out.
But we don't
on
know the
anything.
timetable anyway,
Yeah.
so we're good. We're golden.
Ignorance is bliss.
He's great. He's great, and now we feel like we're on the right track. I don't care what his timetable is. He's learning daily.
But I think that's the impression, as a parent for sure. Before you experience autism, you think of it as sort of, that everything's different.
Yeah.
And it is, but in a way, it's not at all. They're still kids, and they're still fun, and
I could still see him being like king of the prom.
sure,
He's a looker, good-looking guy.
he's charmed all his therapists.
And his cinematographer. and his mom and dad. We're going to the pool. We're going to the pool. We're gonna put our swimming suits on and we're going swimming. We're going to the pool.
Yay!
We're going to the pool.
Are we there yet?
Are we there yet?
My excitement's getting stronger.
We're going to the pool. We're going to the pool.
Yay!
Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Allspaw Jackson.
I'm Shannon Penrod.
And it's good to see you, Fred.
Thank you. It's good to see you too. I feel like I've been away forever. We did shows last week.
Right.
We did a Wednesday and Thursday. So for all of you, it's like, I'm here and I've been here. But I left here on Friday and went on a whirlwind tour
of theme parks.
And you guys know how sick I was last week.
Right.
I was like, death warmed over. But my son was turning 14 on Monday, and he did 4 amusement parks in 7 days. I did 3 of them with him. And
amusement park hangover?
I'm still there.
Yeah.
Like, I'm having a hard time being here because I'm still there. I had a great time. We've had family visiting, and I got to meet the newest member of our family, who is just the most precious thing ever.
Your new niece.
I said hello to Miss Ellie and Miss Addie at the top of the show.
Okay.
But we have a new family member adopted from Colombia, Miss Addie.
Okay.
And oh my gosh, it was so spectacular to see how much she fell in love with my son.
Yeah.
That she says, me Jem, me Jem, and is stuck to his side.
So
and that
sweet.
is so heartwarming. But we have seen everything that there is to see practically in Southern California for amusement parks. And I don't ride rides, but I feel like I'm on a ride.
I bet you do.
Yeah,
I bet you
but
do.
it was really, really fun. And we did a little bit of a live feed from Disneyland on Sunday about some of the passes. I'm going to be covering more of that because you've been to an amusement park with me. If you know how to work it and what to do, it's much more fun. If you go to an amusement park with a kiddo who's on the spectrum or a kid with special needs and you don't know which way is up and what's happening,
it can be miserable.
You will have a miserable time. And I did that once at Disneyland, took Jem and paid the small fortune to get in. And, we got right to the front of the storybook ride and they said, oh, the ride is closed. It broke down. And my child started kicking the little girl next to us. He was like 2.5. And we left in tears.
Right.
Because they were like, you need to get that kid under control. And I said, this is not the happiest place on earth and we're never, ever coming back. And I think I posted something on Facebook and somebody said, well, did you know about the past? Did you know about?
Yeah.
And I went, what? So it's all about information.
It is.
And I don't think that any of the theme parks do a great job of telling you what the information is on their own. I think you need the inside scoop. So I'm trying to give it to you and I'll give you more in the coming weeks. We'll
Sounds
talk about
good.
it.
So let's talk about a few things in the news. On abcnews.go.com, there's a study about baby teeth providing some clues about why some children develop autism and others, sometimes even their twins, don't. And what they've done is they've looked at the small study, it said, which was out of the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, examined baby teeth from 32 sets of twins to see if levels of lead and other metals correlated with an increased risk of developing autism. And what they found was that there was an increased level of metal in the twins, in the ones with autism.
Yeah. But, it's so interesting as we keep looking at the twin studies.
Lead, I'm sorry. I said, lead, metal, same thing.
We keep looking at the twin studies and there are still questions that arise. One of the biggest twin studies that was ever done was the Claire Lajean twin study that was done several years ago that showed us for the first time definitively, because people are like, is it environmental or is it genetic? And, she did the biggest twin study of the time and showed definitively that it is not exclusively one or the other. But now we're honing in more and more because what we find is that occasionally we have twins that have been raised in the exact same environment, that have the exact same genetic makeup, but one of them has autism and the other one doesn't. And it's tricky, but I do think that this is interesting. But what I want to know, first of all, is like how it could be that you would think that if one twin gets exposed to metals and the other one doesn't, so what's the difference? And my question is it the body's ability, does one of them have a protective mechanism that prevents them from storing the heavy metals and the other one doesn't?
Right.
And I think that's going to be but they're seeing that one of the twins has more exposure to metal than the other.
It says lead levels were consistently higher from 10 weeks before birth to 20 weeks after birth in children with autism spectrum disorder than their non-autism spectrum disorder counterparts. The greatest difference was observed at 15 weeks after the twins were born. Lead levels were 1.5 times higher in children with ASD than in their co-twins.
Yeah.
So, but they also found out that manganese, is that how you say it? Manganese?
Yes.
Levels were consistently lower in children with ASD during the critical window, 10 weeks prenatal to birth, and then 5 to 20 weeks after birth. So the levels of manganese, which I guess is a healthy substance that we're supposed to have certain levels of.
They're in most multivitamins.
Okay, we're 2.5 times lower in ASD cases.
Interesting.
So a lack of healthy.
I'm waiting for somebody to be able to put all the pieces together. I'm still very interested in the L. reuteri studies that finally, you know, and you're going to start to see more probiotics that have L. reuteri in them. And I'm wondering now, has somebody put it together? Does L. reuteri help to keep your manganese higher?
Interesting.
At some point, I hope the scientists are talking to each other, because we see all these studies and I go, you know, and I hope that they're talking to each other.
Right.
Fingers crossed. Okay. Serious subject.
Yes, a serious subject out of the Love and Autism conference organizer who sent this out about suicide and autism. First of all, I didn't realize suicide is the second leading cause of death for those between 10 and 24 in the general population.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Each day there's an average of over 5,240 attempts by young people grades 7 to 12. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S. The suicide rate in autism is 40% higher than the general population.
It's frightening, because I think we all think that's not what's happening and that it couldn't happen to us. This scares me to death. It's just the very idea of this. But what I love is in this article, they've given 13 lessons on autism for the autism community. You want to take the first one?
On suicide, yes. Well, first of all, they're saying it happens more than you think, which is what we just said. Between 10 to 66% of individuals with autism report having thought of taking their life, suicide ideations at some point in their life. Between 10 to 33% report attempting suicide at some point in their life. So, as we said, it's 40% higher than in the general population is number one. So it happens more than you think.
And number two is that it might look and sound a little bit different in the autism community.
Right.
That it isn't necessarily going to be a declaration. It can be very vague, and that it really can be confusing. That if the person hasn't been identified as somebody who's suffering from depression, you may not hear it as something that is a suicide. So you really have to be present and looking at everything and taking it all very seriously.
Exactly. And it says it doesn't make you a bad person if you've thought about it. It also doesn't make you a bad person if your child has had suicidal thoughts. Suicide happens when people lose hope. It's not a weakness or a deficit in character. So you need to figure that out.
And number four is that you matter. And I think this is true on all sides of it, that you matter, your ability to be able to talk to the person who's having suicidal thoughts and letting them know that they matter, that there are people who care about them, that they're important, and that there are people who are willing to talk to them is super important.
Yes. Talking about suicidal feelings is a way to give it less power, not more. Silence increases its power, so that's important to remember.
It's important for them to know that they're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And for you, if you're dealing with your child having depression or suicidal thoughts, that you're not alone. This is a hard one, because a lot of times the first person you go to isn't the person who gives you the help and support.
Right.
But persevere. You're not alone. Let them know that they're not alone.
And it's okay if you can't manage it alone. You don't have to, nor should you. Depression has a scary way of clouding judgment, limiting our worldview. So you need to you need to get help from a professional.
It's super important that we make it clear to our kids, especially teenagers. We've seen that addiction is has a very high incidence. That all people tend to think, if I'm depressed, using drugs and alcohol will help me to feel better, but in fact, it becomes an intensifier.
Definitely.
For suicidal feelings. And we've got to make that clear to our kids, that drinking and drugs will not make it better.
Relationships matter. Loneliness increases depression and decreases self-esteem and life satisfaction. So the relationship parts are hugely important, still getting our kids to socialize.
Absolutely, because if you feel like you're part of a tribe, you feel like you belong. And
right.
Then, everybody deserves to be heard. Everybody has a story, and it's important for adults who have depression and have gotten through it to be talking about that. You can talk about that with your child and let them know that it's okay to talk about their feelings as
Right.
well.
Conformity hurts. Labels of not normal are pervasive in the autism community. These are damaging, these ideas about the need to conform.
Yeah. And letting our kids know that suicide is not the answer.
Ever.
I recently had a conversation because my son was turning 14, and I'd been on the phone when he was in the car talking with somebody that was teaching ninth graders, and he said, they're so difficult. Ninth graders are so difficult. And I said to him, well, that's the Romeo and Juliet age.
Right.
And he said, what do you mean? And I said, think about Romeo and Juliet. They're experiencing everything for the first time, and they don't understand that tomorrow will come and tomorrow will bring different things.
Right.
And so Romeo and Juliet end up dead at the end of the play. And I said, it's important. I thought, I haven't had this talk with my son. And so we had the talk the other day. I said, you're 14. And everything is going to feel present in this moment.
Right.
And sometimes it feels, I said, I was sick. And I said, sometimes when I get sick, I'm like, have I been sick forever? Have I ever felt well? Was there ever a day? Because your mind can play tricks on you. And I said, so you've got to remember that ending stuff is not the answer. The answer is to wait and see what happens next and to take action. And we need to be clear about that suicide is not the answer.
And we need to understand, finally, that we weren't designed to handle everything. Resilience and coping has limits. And sometimes there's a problem that's more than we can handle.
Yes.
So, once again.
And sometimes there is
professional
medication.
help. Yes.
That can be very helpful.
Yeah.
All right. We thank Love and Autism for
that
sharing that.
It's very interesting. And there was a happy story in the news that was on Facebook, a Facebook post about a barber's act of kindness towards a boy with autism. The boy, Evan, went to get his hair cut, but he didn't want to stay seated. He was having a really tough time. So Evan's barber, who he had been having his hair cut by for the last 14 years, got someone named Doncha O'Connell, went into the car and with his brother and cut Evan's hair in the car, making him feel at ease. So
we've been hearing more and more of these stories
Right.
of service workers being willing to go the extra mile to be able to help someone.
Yeah.
And I think it's so great when I know that there are people in the autism community who go, enough with the stories about somebody. But you know what? We just had a whole conversation with Dr. Grant-Pichet about when things are reinforcing, we do more of it.
Yes.
And when people get an attaboy for giving good customer service to anybody, then they want to do better customer service. Yeah. We reported on a barber, Jim the barber, who had gotten on the floor a couple of years ago to cut a little boy named Mason's hair. And so many news outlets, including us, we had him on the show via Skype, made such a big fuss about it. And all these parents started coming to him. He just got the Barber of the Year award in Scotland. And I just think, and now he has a whole series of barbers that he's training to be able to do this kind of work with people. Let's not think that we shouldn't praise people for being kind. Yes, I want to get to the day where kindness is just a matter of fact and happens and it isn't newsworthy, but in the meantime, why not praise people for the good work that they do?
Definitely
and to this barber,
give them a shout out.
Who went the extra mile and got in the car, God bless him.
God bless him.
Right?
Right.
It's a wonderful thing. We also, I saw on Facebook this morning that a friend of the show, Russell Lehman, who is the autistic poet, he did a post, and check it out on Facebook because he's wanting to share it with everybody, that he was flying, because he speaks all over the place now, and he had a very, very bad experience at an airport and had a meltdown. He's an adult and he's a poet and he's on the spectrum. He had a meltdown and he said he was sobbing in the airport. And one of the workers came over and was he said, I don't want to disturb you, but can you tell me what's wrong and how I can help? The guy got him on a flight, got him taken care of. He said he didn't want to fly. He had the pilot come over, talk to him. Talk about going the extra mile. Really made the difference. And he said, my faith in humanity was restored. So Russell Lehman, the autistic poet, check out his thing on Facebook today. It's amazing.
Very good.
We love it when people go the extra mile.
Yes, we do.
And we have a guest today with a very controversial book. There are people who are circulating a petition to have Amazon take the book off of Amazon because they find the title offensive. But we're going to talk with Dara Berger about her book, How to Prevent Autism, about what it's about, why it's important, and why, you know, we'll talk a little bit about why some people might be misinterpreting this and finding it offensive, and you know what that's about as well.
Okay.
All right, so Dara Berger coming up after these messages. Stick with us.
Hi guys, welcome back. For the month of June, I figured we'd do some cool things that are kind of like summer camp activities. So the activity we're doing this month is making a shoebox guitar. The materials you'll be needing are an old shoebox, a paper towel roll, a pencil, a stencil, rubber bands, a crayon, and an X-Acto blade, which only the adults will be using. So first things first, I have a shoebox and I painted it just so it's a little bit more interesting. This is an opportunity for your kids to decorate however they choose. They can keep it simple or do some stripes with paint, or you can always use, you know, stickers or tape instead of paint to decorate it. All right, now that I have this, I'm gonna take my stencil, place it on top of the shoebox, and I'm gonna draw a circle somewhere in the center, okay? So now that I have that, I'm gonna take my X-Acto blade, which is why this is for the adults, and cut out the circle. Next, we're gonna cut out a smaller circle at the top of our shoebox guitar. The reason we're going to do this is so that we have a place to insert our paper towel roll, AKA the stem of the guitar. And I'm gonna grab my paper towel roll and I'm gonna trace the outside of this so I can cut a hole on the top of this too to stick this in so it just looks a lot more realistic. It won't be usable, but it'll look pretty cool. Now that it's been traced, now I'm gonna cut it out with the X-Acto blade. And again, this is something that only the adults should be doing. Now that I have both of the holes cut in this, I'm gonna take my guitar strings and place them on. As you can see, it's missing one thing. It's stem, so now I'm gonna put this in the hole we just cut out. All right, the last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my crayon and put this in. And then after that, your guitar is totally done and you're ready to rock out with your kids. And if you're really cool, you'll make another one so you and your child can play together while doing socio-dramatic play, or work on imitation skills where you play a pattern on here and then they try to repeat it. I hope you and your child had lots of fun making this. And until next time, rock on.
Can you see me flying by your side?
Hello, fellow activists. Last segment, we talked about step 3, get support. Step number 4 is don't compare, run your own race. Now, it's one thing to aspire to be like someone that's really helped their child. We all want to do that. That's really different than keeping up with the Joneses. That only serves to make you envious and full of regret. There will always be someone who has a child with autism who is doing better than yours, and there will always be someone who has a child with autism who's doing worse than yours. One morning I was talking to the mom of a recovered child who told me he had been moved into the gifted class. Well, I had heard that week that my own son, who was in 5th grade, was reading at 1st grade level. Now, I have to admit, I was kind of proud of him until that phone call, which put me over the edge. The green-eyed monster of jealousy. Well, later that same day, I got into the elevator as I was taking my son to clinic. There was a father with his 2 sons, one typical and one with severe autism. He was pretty much nonverbal, but he did make some very strange sounds over and over again. He had bite marks, scratches all over his arms. He wore mittens to protect him from himself. The father, however, had a big smile on his face. Needless to say, the universe was sending me a message that day. Don't compare. Be grateful for the progress your child has made and will continue to make. So until next time, keep running your own race at your own pace. Don't forget to stop for water and keep the faith.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Nancy and I are very excited because joining us via Skype right now is author Dara Berger. She is the author of a new book that's coming out on July 4th, but it's available for pre-order right now. The book is titled How to Prevent Autism. If you're thinking that that's slightly controversial, well, welcome, because we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I want to tell you that Dara is also a documentary filmmaker who's currently working on a film about how to prevent chronic illness in children. She served as a board member and co-chair of the programming committee for the National Autism Association New York Metro chapter for 6 years. She began her career, as a news reporter, producer for a local nightly news program, and subsequently founded her own documentary film production company, which is titled Say It Out Loud Productions. And they focus on covering meaningful issues. So we're really excited to have her here and to talk about this book. Again, it's called How to Prevent Autism. It is available right now for pre-order on Amazon.com and will be available on July 4th. I can't talk today. What is up with me?
I was stumbling earlier too.
I'm tongue-tied. But Dara, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
We're thrilled to have you here.
Tell us why you wrote the book.
Well, I wrote the book because I had been, after my son was diagnosed with autism, I immediately jumped into alternative medicine, trying to heal him, and I noticed the healing process in him and myself. And it was in one of those very first visits with his functional medicine doctor that she told me that I could prevent autism in my next child by cleaning out. So I did all these therapies for years, and it worked. My daughter is neurotypical. It was a long road of cleaning out, and I've been sharing that information for years with my son's teachers, therapists, and I just decided, you know what, I need to do this on a larger scale. And I wanted my son's suffering not to be in vain. I wanted to share this information as his legacy.
So you were able to start cleaning out, as you say, your term for it, with you and your son. But is your son still on the autism spectrum, or did you quote?
He is.
He is.
We've made tremendous progress. My
Right.
son suffered a terrible stroke at 18 months, which catapulted him into autism.
Okay.
He lost his speech for 7 years. We regained his speech at 8.5 years old. And, you know, a lot of seasoned speech therapists will tell you that that's kind of shocking. And every day he progresses more and more because we keep doing, you know, special diet, natural therapies, all kinds of supplements, and he's doing great. He progresses every day.
So tell us what the cleaning out entails. What is cleaning out exactly?
Sure. So there's about 3 chapters devoted to that with wonderful practitioners, including Nancy O'Hara, Jerry Brewster, and Maureen McDonald. And a lot of people in the autism community know these wonderful people. And they talk about going on an anti-inflammatory diet, first of all. So take the processed food out. Go organic. Eat whole foods. So you're going to eat fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and meat. So just a very clean diet. That's first of all. Secondly, you're going to get tested for food allergies to see if you have gut issues, food sensitivities, gut dysbiosis, which is an overgrowth of bacteria. And then you're going to take certain supplements to fill your individual nutritional needs. And then lastly, you'll do other types of testing for maybe genetic predispositions that could put you at risk for immune problems or your child.
And you bring up a lot of things in your book, and we should say that it's getting quite a lot of attention. It isn't even out yet, and it's considered controversial. Let's start with the fact that it's considered controversial because you say that autism is treatable and preventable. It's scary to me that in 2016 we still have people who want to argue that autism first. Let's start with treatable. That it's 2017. Yes, I'm living in the past. 2017. Thank you. And that people still are confused about whether autism is treatable. And then on top of that, I think there's more people who don't understand that it is preventable, that there have been studies to show that it is preventable even when you are more genetically predisposed. Tell us what your feelings are on this. Is it frustrating for you, Dara, that we're still have so many people who are unwilling to accept these two facts?
Well, it's not frustrating. It's sad to me because then people, just a regular person who gets pregnant for the first time, isn't looking for that information because they don't think it's available. But here we know we have studied the human genome and there has never been one single gene found to cause autism. That doesn't mean there aren't predispositions, genes that make you susceptible to environmental factors, which is what a lot of people in the field of autism experts believe is going on, that these genes are being turned on that weren't years ago. Then the other idea you have to realize is 95% of cases of children diagnosed with autism is regressive autism. That means they were developing normal from up till about 12 to 36 months, but then something happened to them, something triggered, or little things built up over time, and now all of a sudden they have autism. So that's not genetic, that type of autism.
And I want to take just a second to talk about the fact that we have a huge self-advocate network of individuals who are in the autism community. They're on the spectrum, they're almost exclusively adults, and they're very high functioning, they're brilliant individuals, and I love and adore them. They don't always agree with the things that we say here on the show, and I'm thrilled and excited that that's the case. And I'm thrilled for them that they have the capacity to say, Shannon, I don't agree with you when you say that. That makes me so excited as a mother of a 14-year-old who's on the spectrum. Every time that someone on the spectrum says, I don't agree with you, I go, woohoo, you have the ability to convey to me that you don't agree, and then I can have a conversation and learn from you. And I think that we're three autism moms here talking. I think we can all agree that we want that for all of our kids, for all of our kids that are on the spectrum. And yet we do bunk heads from time to time because there are times when we will say something that those self-advocates think that we're saying that we're disavowing them, that we want to get rid of them, that we don't respect them. And Dara, maybe you can speak to this. When we say that we want to prevent autism in a small child, I know I'm talking about the really disabling aspects of autism.
Absolutely. I mean, I got a lot of comments that people were very upset at me saying I want to prevent them from, coming into the world. I mean, I don't understand how you equate trying to prevent an illness that is so debilitating for some children. There are many children that cannot walk, talk, eat unassisted. And, that was my son for 7 years. He couldn't speak, he couldn't make friends, he couldn't be in a classroom. It was so difficult. But for those people that you're referring to that, they're so lucky, they're functioning well, they're confident who they are, they have a Facebook account, they can send me messages, I'm happy for them that they feel good and they're completely entitled to their own opinion. I know that some of them believe that autism is genetic and it's part of their identity, and that's fine, but that's not a belief for a lot of parents who have children who regressed into autism.
Exactly.
So tell us about some of the things that people can do to minimize the risk then. Let's talk about that.
Oh, absolutely. So the first thing is definitely nutrition is paramount. Start eating better right now. If you already have a child on the spectrum, you want to have another one, or you're having your first. That's the most important thing. And try to, if you have a history of autoimmune issues, or if you're suffering from allergies or fibromyalgia or any kind of autoimmune illness, get to a nutritionist or a functional medicine doctor so they can really guide you, because you're going to have your vitamin D level checked and make sure it's not down at the minimum, which is 30. You want it up somewhere near by 60, 70. People who have thyroid issues, they're 6 times more likely to have a child with autism. And then there's a simple test. A lot of us know the MTHFR test, which is a genetic predisposition. Get tested because you can work around that genetic issue by taking certain supplements. But as far as just without going to a special doctor, eating organic, not keeping Wi-Fi on in your house, especially while you're sleeping. We don't know what that's doing. Do not have GMOs. Glyphosate is everywhere, which is why it's so important to go organic. So those are just a few of the major things that you could just start doing right away, besides changing over to green cleaning products, paying attention to your personal care products, anything that you're going to come into contact with that you can control, make sure it's natural and healthy.
So you're talking about toxins in general.
Yes, absolutely, because they build up over time. We call them contributors. So you think, oh, this is not a big deal, but you layer one on top of another, and just eventually what people believe is happening to these children is these contributors build up over time, and then they meet a trigger. A trigger could be a virus, it could be a vaccine, it could be went into a field that had pesticides sprayed the day before. It could be many different things, but the idea is that your body finally has enough and the immune system implodes and the brain ceases to work properly anymore. And once that happens, it can be so hard to bring that child back from illness.
And so let's talk a little bit about when you had your son and he was diagnosed. I know a lot of people have to make the decision about whether they're going to have another child. Were you afraid that your second child was going to be on the autism spectrum? Were you afraid to conceive again?
I was desperately afraid. I wasn't even sure I was definitely going to have another child. I was cleaning out and doing all the things to Dylan. I did them to myself. So whether he did a new diet, a probiotic, IV vitamin C's, I went along with everything that he did. And no, for years I wasn't sure. But what did happen is I finally got to the point where I just said, I really want to have another child. I've been cleaning out for 3 years. I have to believe, whatever is meant to happen at that point, is going to happen. I've done all I can, because 3 years is a long time. And the most interesting thing happened. I got pregnant on my own right away. With my son, I had to do IVF. And a lot of women don't know, when you can't procreate, you're just not healthy enough to procreate. Nature, the body has a way of not allowing a woman to get pregnant. And I know that's a sensitive topic to talk about, but that's why if you're having trouble getting pregnant, a lot of this preconception clean out can help you get to the place where you can get pregnant naturally.
Yeah, and I want to point out too, for anybody who's watching, I know we were planning on having a second child. Jem was diagnosed with autism and we were afraid. But not because we didn't think we could love another child with autism. That wasn't it. It's that it takes so much of your resources to do right by your child. I was afraid that I didn't have enough strength, money, or resources to be able to do right by another child with autism. And I think a lot of people share that opinion.
Same with us.
Yeah. But and then on the other note, you think, oh, I want to have another child because you're not sure whether your child's going to progress to the point where they can live independently, and you're afraid, that you're not going to live, and you want to make sure that they have people around them.
Yes.
So it becomes that thing back and forth. But many people are in that mode right now where they're trying to decide, am I going to have another child? And you say that this planning begins before conception.
Ideally, but that doesn't mean that someone who finds themselves pregnant should feel like, oh, I shouldn't have this baby. By all means, no, because here's the other issue. Let's say you go through your pregnancy and you did nothing different because you just didn't know better, right? But then your baby is born and you start seeing what these practitioners call the soft signs. So these are chronic constipation, excessive reflux, excessive spitting up, excessive colic, eczema. These are all soft signs that the immune system is starting to get off kilter. Now, if you can right then and there stop and say, okay, instead of putting a prescription on this, some medicine, I'm going to bring them to a functional medicine doctor, a pediatrician, a holistic pediatrician, and I'm going to treat these holistically, and you start doing the diet and the supplements. That's what happened with my daughter. You bring them back very quickly because in essence, you're still preventing autism before it happens.
And I think everybody can agree, everyone can agree that getting our children as healthy as possible and ourselves as healthy as possible, how could that ever be a bad thing? Ever. And that's really what you're talking about, is getting yourself as healthy as possible, getting your child as healthy as possible, and reaping the benefits of that. Would you agree?
Exactly. I mean, we have epidemics of chronic illness in children. I just read an article this morning on Facebook about 3 kids in the same kindergarten class in California that have cancer. I mean, we just have epidemics of asthma, autism, ADHD, all these illnesses that when I was growing up, nobody had. I mean, nobody had anaphylactic allergies. So I think that all the things in the book can be used not just for autism, for other childhood chronic illnesses, just like you're saying, to get children healthy.
Absolutely.
What do you say to the people that don't believe it can be prevented? What are when they argue with you about this?
Well, I haven't really argued with them.
Okay.
Bad messages on Twitter sent directly to me. I try not to engage with people, because everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But if I'm having a healthy debate with someone, I say what you both were talking about earlier. How could it be a bad idea to eat better, to take supplements your body needs, to lower stress, to get fresh air? How could any of these things be a bad thing for your health?
Absolutely. What is your hope for the takeaway for this book that people will get from it?
The takeaway from this book is that you can empower yourself to make small changes over time, and you will see big benefits in the long run.
I think that's a wonderful thing. So the book comes out on July 4th, but people can pre-order it right now. The book is available on Amazon. Are there other places where you can get it?
Oh, sure. It's available on barnesandnoble.com, Google Books. It's available everywhere pretty much. If you can also go to skyhorsepublishing.com's website, and you can see all the sellers that sell the book.
Okay. And there is a petition right now that is circulating for people asking for it to be taken off of Amazon. Is that getting any traction? Are you in any danger of having the book pulled?
I don't believe so. I mean, first of all, Amazon is in the business of selling books, and that would be modern day book burning, deciding which books. And quite frankly, the book would probably just sell a ton better anyway, because everybody wants to read what they're not supposed to read.
Right.
And so the petition came out, and it basically people started buying the book a lot more because they wanted to support the book, and they wanted to send a message to Amazon that this book is needed.
Yes.
And that was a lovely thing for me to see that support. So I don't believe that the banning of the book on change.org is going to be an issue.
Okay. Well, I applaud you for the work
Yes.
that you've done with your child and for putting this together. I know that there are people write into us on a regular basis, and we've covered this topic before, that there are things that you can do to get your child as healthy as possible, get your body as healthy as possible, so that you have the healthiest children that you can possibly have. So I applaud you for doing that, and we want to encourage people. The book is How to Prevent Autism, and it is available now for pre-order, and it is officially out on July 4th. Dara, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back to finish out the show. Stick with us.
Being part of this community is really important to a mom with a son like Jackson, because it really does take a village, and you need so much support, you know, to help bring out all of the amazing qualities and skills and talents that our children have. So I'm just very grateful to everybody who was a part of this.
I think it helps with all sorts of that self-esteem, social skills. They seem to communicate a little bit with each other, and they had a lot of friends. The helpers were phenomenal, and I think the social skills for sure, because they worked together and they did a couple group things across the floor, and they sang songs together, and I yeah, for sure, I think it's a really huge deal. A great program.
What programs like this show is the person is in front of what we call today a disorder. I think what we're finding is that these sorts of brain challenges that make people unique can actually be gifts in ways we haven't discovered in the rest of society to bring them out. So when you see a program like this and you see the kids dancing, having fun, and making up jokes, making up the story. I was here when they did that. That was so amazing to watch, because they were all focused, they were all present, and they were all laughing, they were all getting into the creation of this story. And that to me sort of broke the barrier to say, no, first we're dealing with people, and then we're dealing with the challenges.
And welcome back. We were just talking over the break about the last guest and the controversy over this.
I think it's hard on everyone when we talk about possibilities, and it's hard for all of us not to second guess ourselves. I find myself going, why didn't I know this?
Right,
Why didn't I take this?
Exactly.
And I was working.
Regret. And regret is a terrible thing to feel.
And yet I don't in any way regret who my son is and where he is, or our journey. Now, if you had asked me when he was 3.5, I was in a much different place. And I think that there are different phases to autism and how you feel about it. I see when I am at events, like we're going to be at an event on Saturday, Stephanie's Day is happening this week. And what an amazing family.
Yeah,
and
for those of you that don't know Stephanie's Day here in LA, it's at CBS Studios, and it's a great event for
it is a great event.
Our families.
And started by a family who wanted to honor their child. And Stephanie is the sweetest young woman.
And Steve Malden, who's the general manager of KCBS and KCAL.
Yeah, and especially want to support that family this year because they've had a particularly devastating loss in their family in the last couple of weeks.
Oh, really?
And I really want to support them and be there. But Stephanie is fine, and they're doing Stephanie's Day. But I think there are different phases along the way, and I know I'll be there at the event, and there will be people who will come up who've newly diagnosed children, and they want to hear the hope, right? They want to hear what's possible, and they want to hear what you can do. And I sat next to a woman at the fireworks at Disneyland the other day who had come to California from Louisiana because her child was participating in Surfers Healing, and I was telling her there's hope, and she was like, yay, I want to hear, because there's a certain point where you want to hear about the hope.
Sure.
For the families that are older, sometimes when you tell them about the hope, it hurts.
It does, because they feel like that ship has sailed.
They feel like they missed it.
Right.
And even for me, there's places where there are things that happen now, and I go, oh, if I'd known that, what could we have done? And da-da-da-da-da. I think that's a part of the journey. But I do want to say to everybody out there that, we all need to be respectful of when people are on whatever their part of the journey is. And I do believe that there is a promised land of acceptance. No matter how your child is, I've seen it with people who have kids who are profoundly affected. I've seen them come to the place of acceptance where they go, this is my kid. And they stop with anything else, but this is my kid, and that is the sweet space. Yeah. Now, I'm really lucky because I feel like I'm in that spot, but I'm in that spot with a kid that is remarkable.
Right.
And I don't have to wipe his butt.
Right. And I have done everything. I think I was one of the moms who did almost everything biomatically.
Absolutely.
And my child did not necessarily recover to the degree that I had hoped.
Yes.
But I am at a place of acceptance of where he is now.
And it's a lovely thing to see them for who they are and in all their glory. I think that's a very freeing thing. And if you're not there, don't beat yourself up about it. It's not like a timeline and you have to be there by a certain time.
Right.
But when you're ready to get there, I think that there are people willing to help you to get there and to be in the peace of that and to put the hot rock down of what could have been.
Yeah, and also I think one thing that we have to avoid as moms is the blame game, blaming ourselves for something we didn't do.
Yeah.
Like if you look back and go, well, I didn't eat holistic food when I was pregnant. I didn't, avoid pesticides and things like that and toxins around the house. I didn't do this and this and this for my child. What you're doing then is just carrying this enormous burden of blame, which is just never going to be a benefit.
And it's hard not to. I started to say when I was pregnant with Jem, I was working in a school, a high school. There was a Project Y school, and they were doing construction, active construction, while I was working, and I was a complainer. And like there was one day that I came into my English class and they were working on the roof and there was white stuff raining down on us. And I took my class out and said, we're going to the library. And I complained to the principal and said, I am a pregnant woman. And I don't know what, but I'm also a person and I'm responsible for the safety of these kids. How can you be? And then they would tile the floor and it would smell so bad that kids were getting dizzy and I was pregnant. And I would take the kids out and say, I'm not exposing my child to this, although I would be for a few minutes. And I think about that. I do.
I think about the fact that we redid the floors in our house when Wyatt was an infant. I think about the fact that I painted his room,
and
while
you
he
will.
was an infant.
And I think the truth of it is that we all will. And the honesty is to say to yourself when you do that, I have to stop myself and say, what am I serving right now? I'm not serving him when I go down this rabbit hole. And then I put myself into some form of action, either help somebody else or help my kid or help myself instead of going down that.
Right.
Because you can hear the toilet flushing in the background when your head goes that places. But it's hard. And I think we all have to acknowledge that.
We do.
Now,
and move forward and not live in the past, not compare.
And not compare. You are the queen of saying that. We run our own race.
Run our own
compare.
race.
It's hard.
There's always going to be a child that is doing better than your child, and always a child that is not doing as well as your child.
You know what my grandmother always used to say, the thing about if everybody went someplace together and everybody threw all their troubles into a basket and passed them all around, you'd still take yours back over everybody else's.
I've also heard comparison is the source of all suffering.
There you go. There you go.
We're not all George and Amal Clooney that just had perfect twins at the perfect time and we don't even know what's really in those stories.
Yeah,
right?
we don't know. And it's
You look at the lifestyles of the rich and famous and you think, wow, how do they all seem to manage it so perfectly?
Yeah. I know some people that are rich and famous and it's not all
exactly,
fantasy.
as do I.
I'm going to say my grandmother always used to say, and they still squat behind two shoes.
That's right.
Anyway, we're out of time. I want to give a quick shout out to Fullerton Cares, who was just named the Charity of the Year for the second time in a row by the Women's Club of Fullerton. Fullerton is an amazing place. I say this all the time.
It's like an epicenter of wonderful things.
I was just there the other night, and my son and I were driving through Fullerton, and I was like, Jen, we got to move here sometime. We got to, this is where we got to retire. I want to retire to Fullerton. It's beautiful, and it gets autism in a way that I think few other communities do.
Yeah, it really does.
And Fullerton Cares is a big part of that. So, in any case,
congratulations to that.
Yes, congratulations to Fullerton. And I do want to say that we are not here tomorrow because I still have family in town. I wanted to come in today just because Nancy and Dr. Graham Pichet were here, but I'm spending a little bit more time with family. We'll be back next Wednesday. And then we're back on a regular show schedule for several weeks. So, and we do have Dr. Grant Pichet next Wednesday.
Okay.
So all of that and much, much more. And I apologize for not being here tomorrow. But I know you'll all forgive me and picture me being
We
happy
forgive
at the
you.
pool.
You're with your family.
Happy
Okay.
at the pool with the kiddies.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for being here.
And thank you for having
and
me.
Thank you all for asking your questions. And we thank Dr. Grant Pichet for being here as well. And we will see you next Wednesday. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me.
And yourselves a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye for now.